Today is Sunday, February 17th. We just finished making cabbage rolls. Here's what we did. Okay, so the first ingredient, of course, you need when you make cabbage rolls is your sour cabbage. I took this thing out of the freezer 2 days ago. Normally I just let it sit overnight, but something came up yesterday. So anyway, we have the last of the cabbage that I had from last summer. I think I got about a head and a half here. Anyway, let's talk about how we went from cabbage from the garden to what you see in front of you. So last summer I spent quite a bit of time on the internet trying to find a crock, a fermentation vessel to make the sour cabbage, and here's what I bought. It was quite the saga trying to get this thing to my house. I ordered it from a guy in Oregon. The thing was shipped from someplace like Baltimore or Buffalo or something, and of course it came broken. I sent it back and I got the one that you see in front of us here. I put about 4 cabbages in it and I fired it up last summer with my brine. I finished it on October 3rd. Is when I took the cabbage heads out and put them in the freezer. It took me a long time to find a place that would send this crock to Canada. I couldn't find anybody close to where I live that sold them, so that's how I came to order them. Quite expensive. It was like $377, and then the thing cost me $200 to ship to arrive broken. I guess for those of you that think I'm not spending $600 on a crock, you're probably right. I guess what you could do is you could get something like this. This is a fermentation vessel from a wine and beer making supply store. If you really wanted to go cheap, if you knew somebody in the food service industry, you could maybe use a food grade 5-gallon bucket that they get cooking oil and stuff in. I also own a 5-liter crock, and I'll use it and I'll show you how these crocks work. Okay, so you put your produce in there, whatever you're going to put. This is a smaller one that I bought, and I like to put grated cabbage, and I make sauerkraut. You take these stones and you put it inside, and it weighs down whatever you happen to have in there. And what you want is you want the fluid level, your brine, to be above your vegetable. And that's what these stones do. So after you've put the stones in and all your vegetables, and you put the lid on, you take and you fill up this trench here with water. Now you could also use cooking oil. If you fill it with water, of course, it evaporates and you have to top it up from time to time. And what happens is the water prevents the air from getting inside. There's this little slot here, and it lets the gases escape, of course, and prevents the air from getting inside it to ruin whatever it is that you have on there. So there's no waste at all. You're not scraping off scum off the top or anything like that whenever you ferment something in this thing. Anyway, for those of you that might be interested in buying something like this here in Alberta, like I said, they were really hard to find. I eventually did find a place that sold them. That place is in Edmonton, and it's called Earth's General Store. They sell them, and the advantage there is that you know what you're getting. You can look at it and inspect it for yourself, and you're not paying a bunch of shipping costs. When you're filling up these containers, sometimes you won't quite have enough room, and you can't get the stones in. So what happens is you pour your brine over it screaming hot, and then you let it sit, and a couple of hours later the stuff kind of gets a little bit mushy, and it gets even mushier a couple of days later. So don't panic if you can't quite get your stones in right off the hop. Okay, so today I'll be using up the last of my cabbage from last year. What I have here I think is a half of a Hercules head. I had to cut them to get it stuffed in the crock, and I have a store-bought head. So what we need today, and I guess I'll show you the recipe here. Okay, so this is a suitable amount of rice and stuff that we're going to need to mix in with these cabbage heads. Okay, so the rice that you use, you want to buy a rice that's a sticky rice. Now, my mother said to buy something called pearl rice. This is actually what she gave us after the fact. We couldn't find pearl rice for the first couple of batches, so this is what we used. We used sushi rice. I mixed half sushi rice and half risotto rice, and that worked really well for us as well, and that's probably what we'll use today. So the rest of our stuffing will consist of onions, garlic powder, salt, pepper, and dill. And of course, bacon. Bacon. I dug a rogue onion out of the cold room. There was one that was sprouting. We'll see how much he can sprout after we cook him up and then stick him in the freezer. I don't think he's going to grow much more. Okay, so the first thing I do when I make the stuffing is I cut up the bacon into pieces and I'll fry it. One package of bacon is generally enough with 2 cups each of the 2 types of rice. It's an appropriate amount of stuffing for 1 large head of cabbage or these 2 kind of smaller leftover cabbages that we have. Now these chunks of bacon, they're obviously too big. I like to cut them up into really small pieces for the stuffing, but when the bacon is raw, it's kind of hard to cut it into really small pieces. So what I like to do is I'll cook it a little bit and then I'll cut it up into tiny pieces. In the meantime, while my bacon cooks, I'll fire up the rice. Cooking times and the amount of water that you have to add is identical for both types of rice. So I have 4 cups of rice, more or less, and I have to add 6 cups of water, and you put the rice in your water while the water's still cold, and then fire it up. Okay, now that my bacon is mostly cooked, now is when I'll cut it up into the fine pieces. Now a big time saver when you want to cut something up, I guess there's food processors you can use. The wife bought this thing from the Pampered Chef and I really like it. It works pretty good. You can obliterate your whatever you're cutting up and it only takes it almost looks like hamburger when you're done with it. Okay, so that's probably good enough for our stuffing. So I've put the cut up bacon in a separate bowl and now we're going to cut up our rogue onion. Okay, so now we're all about flavor here at the garden. I'll take this onion and I'll throw it back in the same fry pan that we were cooking our bacon in.